Hi, it's Mark from Top Local Lead Generation. We're here with Bernie Pawlik of Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, talking about Chevy diesels. How you doing, Bernie?
I'm doing well, Mark.
So something we really haven't covered before, I don't even think even ever, is any kind of Chevy diesel stuff. So we're talking about a 2003 Chevy Silverado and a fuel injector replacement. What was going on with this one?
So this vehicle was suffering from an interesting issue, running pretty well, but what was happening is that there was, over a period of time, the crankcase was filling up with diesel fuel. There's an internal fuel leak inside the engine, and so over a period of, say, an oil change, I would add 2 or 3 extra liters of diesel fuel to the crankcase, which is not a good thing. You really want to be lubricating your engine with motor oil, not diesel fuel.
Yeah, even though they run on oil, that's not the right oil to lubricate it.
No, I mean, it's better than running gasoline, but it's, at least it's not exactly proper.
So is an internal fuel leak common on diesels?
Well, it is on some. It's this 6.6 liter GM diesel, which is actually made by Isuzu, an awesome engine, very reliable. All the fuel injection plumbing is pretty much inside the engine, and I'll show you a few pictures in a minute. But the injectors are inside the valve cover. All the fuel lines, I mean, there are external fuel lines, but all the return lines are inside the valve cover. The fuel pump, the high pressure pump, bolts into the front of the engine. It can leak into the engine as well. It's common on a lot of engines. We've seen a lot of 6.4 liter Ford diesels have that issue, but many diesels have the injection plumbing inside the engine, so it can happen on any. Even Ford, we've seen quite a few where there's actually a warning light will come on, or the check engine light will come on if the oil level actually gets too high. So there's a sensor to actually deal with that on a Ford.
So how's the injector replacement on these trucks?
It's a huge job. It's an enormous job. It's about 12 hours worth of work. Can be even more sometimes, but it's a lot of work. And I'll just share a couple of photos here, just to kind of give you an idea what we have here. So this is the. I'll just expand the picture a bit. We still there?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the top of the engine, looking at the valve cover. There's a lot of wiring and accessories and pieces that we've removed. This is looking at the right cylinder bank, and I've just got the sort of front 3 cylinders. You can see the back one is out of the picture because there's piping in the way. It would not make for such a good photo. But this is basically what you're looking at before you take the valve cover off. So those 3 pipes that are bent in interesting shapes are all the high pressure fuel pipes that come from the fuel rail and go into the fuel injectors. Now, in our next photo, we'll have a look with the valve cover removed, and this is the valve cover off. And also, there's a metal plate, spacer plate that goes between the valve cover and the cylinder head, and that's been removed as well, so you can see a little more. We've also removed the wiring harness from the fuel injectors. So this gives us kind of a clean view of the injectors and the return lines and where some of the possible leaks can occur. The red arrows point to the fuel injectors. The blue arrow points to the return pipe. So this is sort of excess fuel that the fuel injectors don't need, and that returns the fuel back into the fuel tank through, of course, a lot of plumbing. And the green arrow points to a couple of possible leaks. Now, I didn't put green arrows everywhere where it could possibly leak, but there are seals and banjo bolts and seals in these particular areas. Plus, it goes to each injector, so there's more points. But there can be any sort of, if there's any fuel leaking on any of these pipes, this goes directly into the crankcase and fills the oil. And the injectors themselves can leak also. So these are some of the places fuel can leak. This is what's on the inside. And again, it takes many hours of removing pieces just to get to this particular view. So it's a large job.
So once it's all done, what's our final outcome here?
Well, the engine runs great. Now, I didn't talk about the diagnostic process we went through for this, because it's a little tricky to find a fuel leak inside an engine when you can't actually run the engine but by the time you remove everything, you can't run the engine to find the leak. So we have to look at mileage on the vehicle, what are the possibilities, and so prior to doing any removal, we did some diagnostic tests with the scan tool, and you can look at the fuel rate and what the how much fuel the injectors are actually injecting, and see what sort of compensation is being made for either worn or leaking injectors. And we found that several of the injectors, the fuel delivery rate was much higher than expected. But this vehicle had 330,000 kilometers. Talked to the owner, he's owned it since 80,000 Ks, and said never replace the injectors. So he's got very good life out of these injectors. And really the most common cause of the problem is a bad injector, or injector. So we replaced the injectors. It's not 100% guaranteed this is going to solve all the problem, but I would say, first of all, the engine's going to start firing and running properly and using an even amount of fuel. The only other real possibility, because we've changed all the seals on the return pipes, is the high pressure injection pump, which is located on the front of the engine. And with this kind of mileage, it's possible that pump could be leaking as well. But short of doing this repair first, it's really impossible to tell where everything's leaking. It's one thing about diesels, it's very complicated often to diagnose things, and you've got to go by experience and knowledge, common problems first, and then go from there.
So you said a word that I don't think we've talked about a lot. Like, these are under a lot of high pressure. Like, how high is the pressure inside?
Some of these are like 25,000 PSI. That's just an insane amount of pressure in the system. So there's an amazing amount of pressure. These fuel injectors in these modern vehicles, and that goes for modern gasoline engines too. They're extremely high tech. I mean, we're dealing with enormous pressures. Extremely precise fuel delivery. I don't have the measurement terms to say on this, that are thought out, but I mean, the amount of fuel delivery is so minute, and a lot of these injectors on diesels, now this is an 03, it's kind of old, but like a lot of newer diesels, you can barely hear the engine running because of the injection. Some of them will do actually up to 7 injection pulses per combustion stroke. So they'll fire a couple little shots of fuel as the piston's coming up. They'll fire the main shot, then they'll fire a couple more, and that's what keeps the engine from actually making the loud knocking noise that you hear on diesels typically. It's pretty incredible. But things do go wrong, and this is why you need to change your fuel filters. Now, this is another interesting point. I talked to the owner. He goes, don't worry about changing my fuel filter. I just changed it last week. He goes, I change it religiously every 6 months. So this is an owner that's really conscientious about taking care of their vehicle. Every 6 months is probably too much, but you know what? He's got 330,000 kilometers out of a set of fuel injectors. Most diesels never go that far. So, good maintenance does pay off.
Absolutely. That's the message of all these, really, isn't it?
It is.
Maintain your vehicle, and it'll treat you a lot better than not maintaining it. Yeah.
We've had a couple of Mercedes you and I have talked about over the last 6 months, 3-liter Mercedes diesels where people have not changed their oil. One of them, it cost $22,000 for a new engine. Another one, a couple of weeks ago, the turbocharger basically broke in half. And these are under 50,000 kilometers. But like a Mercedes 3-liter diesel, take good care of it. It will last you 3, 4, 5. It should last 500,000 kilometers. Just change the oil regularly. Yeah, there's a few things that'll go wrong. You'll spend some money, but overall, it'll last a long, long time.
So back to this Chevy, how are Chevy GM diesels comparing to the other American diesel trucks?
I think they're really good. Personally, to me, it's between this engine or Cummins. If you're looking at these older generation diesels, actually even into the newer years. I guess the Ford 6.7, we haven't run into any problems with that yet, and I haven't heard a lot of problems. So Ford may have finally figured things out, but I mean, they had 2 generations of really bad engines, just very, very costly, and a lot of dissatisfied owners. So I would not. They're nice trucks. I just wouldn't touch a Ford diesel. It's either, and I think the Chevys are more reliable in terms of the actual truck, less front end parts, as I was alluding to in an earlier hangout. We talked about Jeeps and Dodge front ends wearing out. I mean, by the time you hit 100,000 kilometers on a Dodge, you're doing all the ball joints and tie rod ends. They all wear out. So the Chevy seem to be a lot more reliable. I mean, overall, I think that's the truck I'd go for.
So, any final thoughts on this whole repair service?
You know what? It's all really, do good maintenance. If you're buying a diesel, do your homework. And I mean, the other thing about diesels I mentioned quite a few times is, if you're thinking about buying a diesel, you gotta ask yourself, do you really need one? Because they do cost a lot of money to fix. I mean, this is not gonna be a cheap repair bill for the customer. But if you need a diesel to haul a lot of weight, well, then it's worth it. But if you're just buying it for show, I don't know, maybe a sports car might be cheaper and more fun. Or get a truck with a gas motor and, you know, an F-150 or, you know, a half-ton truck, because it'll be more reliable and cheaper.
So if you want some real honest truth about your vehicles and how to maintain them properly, or you have a Chevy diesel and it's getting up there and you need to get the injectors changed, the guys to call are Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, 604-327-7112. They've done a lot of this kind of work. They're experts. They're the guys you want to trust. Check out their website, pawlikautomotive.com. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark. Talk to you again soon.